Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hey guys, I'm back. I don't know why I decided to do this video today. I'm really feeling very low energy today. Tonight, I should say. But to get back to what I started doing about a week or so ago, and that's my videos on duo albums, or I should say favorite duo albums. The duo is a fairly unusual grouping in terms of size, and yet I've been thinking about doing this video for some time and kind of paying attention to the duo albums that I have in my collection, and thinking that it wasn't that many, I suddenly come to realize how incredibly large the selection is. And I'm not doing this to be any kind of definitive thing in my collection. I'm not going to show duo albums I don't like, for instance, even ones that I have. And I'm not even going to try to do like definitive of what I've got in my collection that's duo albums. I'm just going to show favorites. And I'm starting with my vinyl, and this might be the last vinyl video, or I'll probably starting with the next video that I do on duos. You know, whatever vinyl I have left over here is going to be it, and then we're going to start with the CDs. And I realized that I have many more compact discs that are duo albums that I didn't realize I had. I didn't realize they were duo albums. And so I'm just going to start with some, these are all, you know, albums that I think very highly of. Here's one that was recorded in February 1982. Probably came out late in the year. I remember buying, this is another one. Interesting, digital recording was new. CDs weren't out yet, but digital recording was in existence, and they started putting stickers on these new albums showing that they were digital recordings. So it was trumpeter Don Cherry, who's my favorite trumpet player of all time, and drummer Ed Blackwell. Now both of them have passed away since. And it's just the two of them. And I love this album. They did an earlier album called MU Part 1 and 2 that was one big long session that was released on two separate albums back in the, I want to say like 69 or 70. Only problem with those recordings, they were very poorly recorded. It kind of sounded like somebody hung a couple of microphones in the room and they just picked up whatever. There was no depth to the instruments, which is kind of disappointing because I happen to love this kind of permeation, this grouping of musicians. The Ed Blackwell pretty much sticks to the drum kit on this one. He does play a bit of a wood drum as well, but he's playing mostly rhythms on the drum kit, kind of African inspired. And these are mostly originals. They do Bemsha Swing by Thelonious Monk. It seems like Don Cherry used to always like to throw a Monk track in a lot of these albums. And Ed Blackwell gets a few credits, which are things that were mainly percussion-led pieces. Don Cherry plays the trumpet, his famous pocket trumpet. He plays piano. He plays melodica, that little keyboard thing that you blow into. Sounds a little bit like a harmonica. The dusunguni, which is like I think it's 4 strings, like a 4-string African bass guitar almost, but it's an acoustic instrument. And he plays a little bit of organ as well. There's not a lot, if any, of overdubbing on this, oddly enough. I think there is some, but it's a fairly live thing. But being an ECM recording, recorded in their Tom Studio Bauer in Ludwigsburg, it has a great sound. I wish that MU Parts 1 and 2 had been recorded as well. I really love this album. This is one that, when the CD era came around in the late 80s, I kind of ran to get on CD, just for that extra clarity. it's a fun album. But of course, it doesn't sound like a band. It's not meant to sound like a band. You've got basically percussion, and sometimes it's piano, sometimes there's percussion and trumpet. A very interesting album. Another favorite duo album is, I got a couple albums I'm going to show here that I actually, because they are out of print, I have put them on my Cosmic Pickle page, so the albums actually are up on Cosmic Pickle. They may have been put up a couple years ago, but they're actually up there in full to listen to, and they're not videos of me talking about them at all or anything. They're just the albums are there. And here in the avant-garde world, Derek Holland, the upright bass player, and Derek Bailey, the guitarist. This is very avant-garde, improvisations for cello and guitar. An album that I bought, I don't know, well, the recording is from January 1971. I bought the album probably in 78 or 79. Is this a Japo? No, this is an ECM album, early ECM album that has gone out of print. Very avant-garde, and one that you can listen to yourself before you decide to go look for it, because it's very avant-garde. And I had a period with this kind of very experimental avant-garde music that was pretty much 90% of what I listened to for a couple of years, and free jazz and stuff like that. And then subsequent years kind of fell off a bit with it. And eventually, when I realized this probably was never going to come out on CD, and I got curious because I hadn't played it for years, I decided, okay, I'm going to dig out the vinyl, but because my turntable's all kind of messed up, I'm not just going to play a record. If I really want to hear it, I'm going to put it on the turntable, and I'm going to copy it in my computer at the same time, so I don't have to keep on digging out the vinyl, especially with my messed up turntable, and one of the channels kind of starts fading out and stuff like that. So anytime I'm looking at my vinyl collection of things that have never been re-released on CD, I tend to get kind of serious about it. And while I'm playing the album, I set up all the parameters and the computer stuff to record it into my PC so that I can burn it onto a disc for myself and have the files on my computer to listen to, but also so that I don't have to go back to the vinyl. And this is one that I did a number of years ago now. And I'm glad I did it. And it's up on my Cosmic Pickle page for you to listen to. And it's avant-garde. And the strange thing is, listening to this again got me into a whole new thing again after years of really not listening to this kind of out there stuff. Kind of got me back into it. This album in particular, which I love, but other Derek Bailey things, solo Derek Bailey things, things he did with bands, but all in that very free, very avant-garde stuff. And I kind of got a new appreciation for it. I like that you can't tell where it's going to go. There's not a predictable chord following this chord or anything, but it's certainly an acquired taste. But after many years of not listening to that kind of free stuff, I really just got, in the last, year or so, maybe not even a year, I really gained a new appreciation for the really, really abstract stuff. Now, not abstract at all, but another album that is long out of print that I have on my Cosmic Pickle page for everyone to listen to. This is a very conservative album, but really lovely. Almost the polar opposite of what I just showed. And it's a album by Richie Bayrock, the pianist, and George Mraz, the upright bass player. I didn't know this at the time that I bought this. Here's an album that was recorded in January of 1981. This is one of those albums. I was in a record store in the early 80s, probably shortly after it was recorded. And it wasn't available long, as it turns out. But I was in a chain, in a major record chain that doesn't exist anymore. And I'd be damned if I can actually remember. I think it was called Music World. But wait, does the sticker stay on it? No, the sticker doesn't stay on it. Damn. I think it was called Music World. And it was a chain that was around here in Jersey. And I'm, flipping through the miscellaneous. And the first thing that made me stop to look at this was the cover. And I was in the jazz section, so it's like, damn. This is one of those covers where I love the cover so much, I'm thinking to myself, damn, I would like to buy the album just for that cover alone. Then I looked at the names, and I realized that, oh man, I know these guys. These were 2/4, half of John Abercrombie's band that had been in existence from about 1978 till about 1980 or 81. Probably went right up until about the time this record was made. Richie Byrock was the pianist of John Abercrombie's band, who made 3 albums for the ECM label. 3 of my favorite albums of John Abercrombie's, as a matter of fact. And George Mraz was the bass player on those. So these guys had a working relationship. They may have had a working relationship before the Abercrombie Quartet, as it was known. I'm not sure, but they certainly had one for several years when they made this. Beautiful album, just piano and upright bass, no drums. Very much in the Bill Evans school. As a matter of fact, Bill Evans had died, I believe Bill Evans died in September of 1980. And this was recorded in January 1981, and this album is dedicated to the memory of Bill Evans. One of the nice things about this album is it's all originals. All written by Richie Byrock, and George Mraz did write 1 track on there. And if you pick up a lot of Richie Byrock's albums, whether they're solo piano or whatever they are, he usually does mixes and standards with his stuff. And I like when he does all originals. So this, to me, is a particularly excellent album. So when I kind of rediscovered this, and again copied it into my computer for future listening, back a few years ago, I'm like, gee, instead of having a vinyl rip with little pops and clicks here and there, I'd really like to get this on CD. And I took a look at it online, only to discover that not only had it never come out on CD, but the label that it was released on, which was called IPI International Phonograph Incorporated, out of Connecticut. This is the only album that was ever released on the label. So I don't know if it was a new record label that started up that petered out after they put out the first album, or more than likely, this is one of the 2 musicians' own labels, and they were going to start a label, and decided it was too much work, and kind of decided not to continue on with it. Especially because I guess in both cases they were getting their own albums released on other jazz labels anyway. But it's the only release that ever came out of the label, hence the reason that the label didn't exist for long. So as a result, there was no kind of future CD release, and it's a shame because, especially with the fact that there's no drums on here, it's a nice quiet recording that you would like. I would like to have on CD. Get rid of that surface noise that may exist there, or the little clicks and pops. Though my copy remains pretty good. You can hear it. I mean, it's on my Cosmic Pickle page. You can hear it for yourself. I don't think it's distracting, the amount of the minute amount of pops and everything on there. But it would be awful nice if it was clean. If there was a nice clean CD version of it out there. But it's a beautiful album, very much in the Bill Evans mode. And in this video, I would include Bill Evans. Bill Evans made some duo albums. He made, I believe it was 2 duo albums early on, maybe early 60s, maybe even late 50s with Jim Hall. But later in his career, in the 70s, maybe even the early 80s, he did at least 2 duo albums with bassist Eddie Gomez. So a very similar setup to this Richie Byrock album, where there was just piano and upright bass. And I don't have those albums yet. I will get to them eventually. They're on my wish list along with hundreds of other things, those Bill Evans albums. But those that Bill Evans and Eddie Gomez duo albums are up on YouTube in full, and I've listened to them numerous times there, and man, they're killer beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Here's a particular favorite. See, the good thing with doing this format is when I hit a certain amount of time, I'm just going to stop. So no 90-minute videos. Here's a particular favorite. Favorite album by these two artists: John Abercrombie, Ralph Towner, two guitarists. Sargasso Sea, recorded in 1976, released late 76. John Abercrombie did Characters, which I've talked about many times before, which was a 1977 all-solo guitar album, just John Abercrombie. That's my favorite John Abercrombie album. This is my second favorite John Abercrombie album. And it's both of them, and I don't know where it lies in Ralph Towner's discographies as far as my favorites. It's definitely up there, maybe my second or third favorite Ralph Towner album. It's hard to say. Just the two of them. They did another album called 5 Years Later in 1981. And as far as 5 Years Later goes, I've heard a lot of people prefer that album. And one of the reasons that I remember a critic saying that they liked the 5 Years Later album better is because in the course of the 5 years, two musicians improved technically. But to me that doesn't matter. It's what does the music speak of? Were they both better guitarists 5 years later? Maybe. I mean, they were always playing and gigging and everything, so they probably got better. But to me, that's not even something I listen for. To me, this album captures an atmosphere like very few records do that I've ever heard. And that's why it's, easily among my favorite albums ever. And it's just Ralph Towner on his 12-string acoustic guitar, his classical guitar, plays a little bit of piano. John Abercrombie on electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, and also, it doesn't list it here, but I'm pretty sure that his mandolin guitar is on here. He's famous during this time period for this electric mandolin guitar that was a big part of his sound that really made him unique, to me anyway, made him unique. And it was definitely my favorite period of his playing. To me, there's a vibe and an atmosphere to this that just beats out really the 5 Years Later album that came out 5 years after. And also, the nice addition of piano. Ralph Towner plays piano and it's just subtle. It's not a big part of the composition even. I think 2 tracks, maybe in 3. And it's very slight. It's not even, the piano doesn't even appear throughout the entire track. It's just there for a little, kind of like icing on the cake when it appears. And when it does appear, it just kind of brings it home. It's like the icing on the cake. It's a different timbre than the guitars. And as a result, it just adds a nice sheen to the whole thing. This is an incredibly, to me, an atmospheric recording. And the music reflects that. It's really not about them necessarily tearing up the fretboard and doing wild solos, even though there's a couple tracks that are on a more up-tempo thing, which turn out not even to be my favorites. These are guys that can go slow and take their time and really do have something to say without kind of, a lot of these albums are just the guys waiting to get to play their solo, and it's just about, we're going to play the little melody of the song and then we're going to go off in a solo, but to me, that's not what these albums are about. It's like a complete musical experience, wonderful sound, wonderful mood. It just happens to come from 2 guys that are primarily guitarists. But to me, those very subtle and slight and occasional additions of Ralph Towner's piano just really brings it up to another level. Now here's one kind of outside of that world. And to me, this is a major recording for me in my personal history too. This is something that I picked up before I even got into jazz. I think I was I kind of went from rock to progressive rock to obscure progressive rock bands, including instrumental progressive rock bands or rock bands that sang but not in English, so languages I didn't understand. Then I got into the kind of Klaus Schulze and the Berlin and the electronic music stuff. just before I discovered ECM and the minimalists and all the jazz artists as a result. And so I think it was probably shortly after my discovery of Klaus Schulze, before I got into the ECM and the jazz world, I came across Evening Star by Fripp and Eno, which to me is the best thing that Fripp ever did, because I'm not a big fan of King Crimson anyway. So yeah, so you're left with his solo albums, which he does a lot of electronic solo albums, which I quite like, but never equaled this one. And another example of the album cover really, really reflecting what the music sounds like. The first side is kind of pretty, kind of like a pretty version of what they do, all electronic and basically a lot of electric guitar processed in different ways, and some subtle Eno synthesizer, a little bit of piano on one track. And it's the pretty thing. And the second side is dark. It's about like 28 minute long piece called An Index of Metals. That one took me a while to get into and appreciate, but now I actually prefer it over the first side. The pretty side is nice, but to me now I kind of sit through and I listen to the first side to get to the second side. The second side is dark, but there's a beauty in that darkness. Very dark, very processed guitars. Very electronic processed guitars, but I absolutely love it. Can't listen to it during the day. That is definitely a night piece, and this is and I mean a night piece like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. kind of night piece. But the cover, I have to wonder that the cover, was it made after the music was created and they brought it to the artist, because it really kind of captures it really well. Absolute classic album. Not really any kind of rockish stuff on there, despite the background of the musicians involved. And to me, light years beyond No Pussyfooting, which was the first album they did together, which to me was a little kind of like raw, informative, and kind of like their earlier album, No Pussyfooting. It was kind of like them feeling out and feeling out, can we do this just the two of us and no drums, and what can we come up with type of thing. But to me it comes off as kind of like raw and experimental, where Evening Star is more like they figured it out. They figured out what they could do and how they could kind of create this world, using just their own instrumentation of the synthesizer and the electric guitar, and really coming up with pieces for it. So, and a particular favorite of mine. Okay, so, I've gone on for over 20 minutes. I got a handful of albums left, and probably starting the next time I do a duo thing, I'll probably start bringing some CDs into the mix. And that's it. Hope there is some value to this. And I was thinking of coming on and maybe talking about my project that my musical project that I'm working on, which is pretty abstract at times and very conceptual. I was going to come in and talk about the concept rather than the actual maybe music itself. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I hope this wasn't a waste of your time. And I'll talk to everybody soon, hopefully.
Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.